Great. Well, thank you all so much for coming. This is going to be our webinar, an introduction to Covidence, as part of our systematic review webinar series this spring. So I'm Amelia Brunskill. I'm one of the liaison librarians at the Library of the Health Sciences, Chicago. I'm the liaison librarian for the College of the Applied Health Sciences. I'm joined here by my colleague, Emily Johnson Barlow, who is associate professor at our Peoria campus. And she's going to be paying attention to the chat. As you know, if you have any questions during this, please feel to put them in the chat. She'll either let me know if it's something that I can address well in a minute, or we might otherwise hold it to the end. So what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to be spending some time just talking sort of brief overview of just sort of what Covidence is. Then we're going to be spending sort of the bulk of the time talking about what it does. And the best way to understand that is to see it in action. So we're going to be doing sort of an extended demo. We're then going to be talking about documentation that's available. Then we're going to be talking about setting up an account for UIC users, and then we're going to have time at the end for any questions that you might have. So first off, so what is Covidence? So Covidence is a web-based tool that's specifically designed to support the screening, review, and extraction stages of a systematic review or scoping review. It's a subscription resource that we license at UIC. We've licensed it starting in 2022, and it's been very useful, so we've continued it ever since. And just as some brief background on my experience with it, I'm certainly not an expert in Covidence, but I've used it quite a bit. I and my colleague, Rosie Haneke, we did a scoping review throughout the full review process, and I'm going to be using that as sort of the example when we do our demo. I've helped multiple different teams import their records into Covidence. I do basic instruction, also do a basic instruction about how to use it for students, faculty, and staff here at UIC. So what does it do? So here on the right-hand side, I have an example of a Prisma chart, because there'll be different parts of this where it really is very helpful using Covidence. So what Covidence does is it allows for easy tracking of records throughout the screening extraction process. So all of these things in the Prisma review, all of these places we have to keep track of, whether a record has been excluded or screened, or, why it's been excluded when you get to the full text review, and what's ultimately included. It helps you keep track of all of that, as opposed to using something like an Excel spreadsheet where you would be having to, create your own systems to, track or tag how, it's gone through the screening process. But Covidence is specifically designed to keep track of that. So that's part of its great value. Also, it's really helpful in terms of it allows for blinded review by multiple reviewers. So you can have two people making decisions, and you're not seeing what decision the other person has, whether they've said yes to include or no. So you have blinded review. It also flags discrepancies in reviewer decisions. So if one person says yes and one person says no, it puts those in a sort of special box to sort of be reviewed another time for a final determination to be made. It allows for easy documentation of numbers for the Prisma chart, put a little asterisk through the by that, which we'll be talking about later, but it does do a lot of that work for you. It also has a deduplication function built in. So that's a lot of the different features of Covidence. So one thing that I sort of like to address is, sometimes the question comes up of, do you need to use a citation manager before using Covidence? So when I say citation manager, that includes things like Zotero and EndNote. RefWorks are all examples of citation managers. So somewhere that you've put all of the records that you've gotten from the database, different databases that you've searched. And the answer is, technically speaking, not necessarily. So if all of your exported database files that you have are in RIS or PubMed format, then they can be directly imported into Covidence. However, if any of your files are not in RIS or PubMed format, then they'll need to be converted to RIS format or EndNote XML format before you put them in. So sometimes you have to use a citation manager in order to get files in the correct format. Also, for finding full text, Covidence doesn't have a way to automatically locate full text, and citation managers often do. Doesn't often work 100% of the time. You won't get all of the PDFs that you need through that process, but you can often get a lot, and then you can do a bulk import from some of them into Covidence. So it can be helpful to have that intermediary step of the citation manager. And of course, once you're writing your paper, then you might be wanting to use a citation manager to access those records anyway. Is Covidence unique? No, so it's not the only systematic review tool that's available. There's other sort of similar tools. Some examples are Distiller SR, RAN, Abstract, and there's also others. But it is the one that we specifically subscribe to at UIC, and it is more fully featured and user-friendly than the free options that I've seen in practice. And also some of them, like RAN, that used to just be completely free, they're now making tiered paid option. There is still a free option, but there's not as many as the features and options as the ones that require payment. Okay, so how does it work? So this is going to be our long period of demo time. So I'm going to be showing how to start a new review, and then I'm going to be transitioning to a demo review, which is sort of a duplicate of the scoping review that me and my colleague, Rosie Henneke, looked at, which was related to looking for research literature related to university students who are non-users of their academic library. So just as background, why the sort of records that come up. So going to be talking about, setting up review permissions and settings, big picture view of the process, importing records into your account, screening records, data extraction, and Prisma. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to navigate to Covidence, and this is what it looks like, just covidence.org. I'm going to go ahead and sign in. Okay, so for starting a new review, you have this nice big button. Start a new review. And first of all, it asks if you are creating a Cochrane review. If you are, you'll know. If not, then you aren't. Just ask you then to name your review, pick your review type. I usually talk about it in terms of systematic reviews and scoping reviews, but there are technically other review types listed here, and there's also an option for other. You pick your area, very broad area of research. And for most people, you'll only have this UIC option. I just happen to have a personal option as well because I created an account before we started our subscription at UIC. And you'll see the nice thing about the UIC account is you have unlimited reviews. So there's no limit to how many you can create in a year or have ongoing at the same time, which is great. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel because for this, I'm going to use the demo review that I have already set up. So scrolling down to this demo review. So we could pretend that this is the one that we had just created. And the first thing that you will want to do when you set up a new review is go into the settings. And there's a lot of different options within the settings. So I'm going to go through all of them. So again, we put in, it would pre-populate some of this information that you already gave it. There is a new feature, which I must admit I haven't personally used yet, for if you are doing a study where you're trying to limit to RCTs, to randomized controlled trials. You have the option for it to try and tag references reporting on RCTs or to remove references reporting on RCTs before screening. So early access is sort of, in beta. And you can learn more about that here if you want to and see if that might be a good decision for you or not. There's also space for you to document information about your search. I tend to have that in a separate document, but you could use that here, and even just having the date, like this is the date when I did these searches, could be useful to have. Then you can say how many reviewers you want to require for the different stages. So for screening, title, and abstract, for reviewing the full text, then for data extraction. So you can change these numbers if you want to. And then there's two data extraction tool options, extraction 1 and extraction 2. Extraction 1 is very much sort of based on a PICO format, so population, intervention, comparison, outcome, that you're using those, that you are extracting pieces of information along those lines. And it's recommended by Cochrane and has some different features. Extraction 2 is much more customizable. So if you're like, no, the PICO format is not how I'm planning to do my extraction, I'm looking at other types of sort of questions, trying to extract other types of information, then the extraction 2 might be a better fit in that scenario. But again, has these nice links to sort of learn more if you want to decide like, okay, which extraction form is going to make more sense for my particular project. Okay, so if we scroll up to the top, next we have reviewers. So I've set it up. And for this one, I have me and I have my colleague, Rosie Haneke, but we could also invite additional reviewers, as many as you need for the project. Then under team settings, you can both look at this in terms of, progress throughout the time spent on review. So if you're like, oh, I don't feel like maybe we're running a little bit behind, is maybe someone, falling a little bit behind in terms of their review work, maybe we need to reshuffle things a little bit. You can see sort of who's done sort of what so far, what decisions have been made. And you can also create rules. So you can say either just everybody can do everything, or you can say, actually, I'm going to manage the rules and I want, all studies must be screened by, maybe certain people, or maybe conflicts need to be resolved by a particular person. So you might say perhaps the PI should always be the person resolving the conflicts. It's very similar for full text review. Screening and conflicts, you can make those decisions. You can see who's done what so far. And then extraction, you can sort of see the progress. For eligibility criteria, it uses sort of a PICO style, where you say your inclusion and your exclusion criteria for your population. So here for us, we said, okay, we're focusing on students who are undergraduates or graduates. If it's general public or not academic, students in like K through 12, that's not what we're interested in. For us, we focus more on sort of study characteristics. So it needs to be a primary research study in an academic library setting. Focus really needs to be on non-users. And then we have some things that we want excluded. So anything that's a commentary, an essay, or review article, definitely don't want. Anything where they're not specifically sort of focusing on non-users. And then for other, we have one of our exclusion criteria is we're excluding anything that isn't in English, French, or Spanish. So you could save those. And the nice thing about filling these out here is you're going to be able to see these when you get into your title and abstract review, so that you can quickly refer back to, okay, what were my inclusion and exclusion criteria? Also, these highlights, these are words that you can use to flag whether something more likely to be something included or excluded. So for inclusion words, I just put some like university, college, non-users, ones that I want to be able to like quickly see. These will show up in green in the record as like, oh, like this is an indication that this might well be one that I want to include. And the exclusion, things like public, for me, and like public libraries aren't of interest, and essay would also be a indication that less likely to want to include it. So anything that's sort of helpful for you there, and you can choose to see the highlights or not see the highlights as you're doing the review. And then full text exclusion reasons. So for the title and abstract, you don't need to say why you say no, you can just say no. But when you get to the full text, you're going to have to be picking a reason, because it's going to be showing up in your Prisma chart of like, why did you exclude it? So here you can put different reasons why you would want to be excluding it. So here, I put one's about language, about population, not a research study, rock settings, the ones that we chose. And then study tags. Some of these, won't let you delete them. So we have awaiting classification and ongoing study because it says we have to. But we also just created ones that were just useful for our purposes. There were times where we said like, oh, this is a study that we are not going to ultimately include, but we will want to mention in our initial literature review section for our paper. So we said lit review candidate, so we could easily find those ones again. We also made a special flag for things that, felt unclear in certain ways that we really wanted to review together. And because it came up for us, because we were looking at quite a bit of older materials, some of them didn't have an abstract. And so we were like, okay, why are we saying maybe or no? Maybe. It's because it doesn't have an abstract. We really need to look at this maybe more closely. So those are things that we chose to flag and create study tags for. So a lot of different stuff tucked into this settings area. Okay, so then just sort of big picture overview, and before we start going into the sections more one by one, is we're going to be importing the references here. Then you see the title and abstract screening, then the full text review, and then the extraction. And a lot of the power of this is that it, based on the decisions that you, and if there's another reviewer for the records, make, it moves the records to where it should be. So if both I and the other reviewer, Rosie, look at something and we both say no, then it will go to the irrelevant. If we both say yes, then it will get moved on to the full text review. If we disagree, then it's going to go to this resolve conflicts area. And same, for full text review to extraction, it'll go to excluded, or if we both say yes, it will go down to be extracted. So it really keeps the records organized for you and sort of pushes them where they need to be through the chart, which is very helpful in terms of trying to keep track of like what work still needs to be done versus what has already had decisions made. All right, so for this initial import, this is where once you've run your searches in the databases and you have, the file format. So here it says, it needs to be in EndNote XML format, PubMed format, or RIS text format. Most databases do have an RIS text format option. So if you have a file with all of the records from that database, then you can import it in. You're usually going to be doing it to screen because you're going to be starting with that title and abstract. Okay, so say pick screen. And then you pick the database of interest. And if it doesn't already have the one that you're using listed, then you can manage your source and add a new one. And then you would just go, browse to the file and then import. And I do like to port out like this import history. If you lose track of which ones you've imported or not, you can go back and look and see the history. And if you pick your source type, I believe it'll actually sort of give you the database name. I tend to also include the database name and the name of the file, so I can sort of easily see which databases I've included. And you'll see that there is undo import option, but then sometimes it's disabled. Once you begin making decisions that impact the records, then you can no longer undo it. But if you put a record in and then realize immediately, oh, I picked the wrong file, you can go ahead and remove that one and upload it again. All right, so going back, when you import it as it goes, it will flag what it thinks are duplicates. So we'll see here that there are 433 items that were flagged as being duplicate. You can review those. And, if you find something that you realize like, no, that's not actually duplicate, you can say not a duplicate, and it'll get moved back to the title and abstract review. My experience is that it seems to do pretty well with flagging things that are in fact duplicates. There is also an option if there's something that is a duplicate that it didn't catch, you can manually tag something as a duplicate as well. Okay, So in this title and abstract screening, this big blue button with continue, it sees all of the records that you have to screen. So you'll see here, there's 4 that both me and Rosie have already looked at. There's one of our 4 and that we've agreed, one of them that we made different decisions on. So that's gone to the resolve conflict section. 30, which only one of us have looked at so far, and then a whole bunch of them which have no votes so far. So if we go into this list of ones to be screened, we get the title, the author information, the abstract if it's included in the record, and we can just make any decision that we want to. We could say no, maybe, or yes. And if we click no, it just disappears. Again, we don't have to say anything more. Or we could say yes, and then it would be go to await the other decision by the reviewer. So it's a nice process. If we wanted to remind ourselves what our criteria were in terms of our inclusion and exclusion, we can click on that criteria and we can get reminded. If we scroll, it will stay up at the top. Or we can hide it back up again. We can choose to show highlights. And then we'll see there in green, there's an example of red. Or we can choose to hide highlights if you don't find that helpful. There's also, if you want to add a tag, so let's say I want to include this one as one of our lit review candidates. I'm going to click on that. And then under the tags, I'm going to say lit review candidate. Clear that filter, oopsies. And then you'll see the tag shows up down here on that record. So you could do that to multiple records at once if you wanted to, or just do one at a time. And then I had mentioned before, there's a way of manually selecting something as a duplicate. So you could, if you've ran into 2 that you are like, this is the same, you could flag as a duplicate there. If you wanted to add a note of any kind, you could do it here. Okay. All right, so if you both agree that it should go down to the full text review, then we'll see any of those ones here. So we can click on continue for the screening for the full text review. And this is what it looks like here. In terms of the full text, again, unfortunately, it doesn't have Covidence doesn't have a mechanism to automatically retrieve full text. You have to either manually load them one by one, or if you're using a citation manager tool like EndNote, there may be an option for a bulk upload. But here, I've just uploaded the PDF, so I could click on the PDF, look through it, make my decision. And then come back and say either include or exclude. But again, here, if I'm going to pick exclude, then I'm going to need to give a reason. And these are the ones that I already have. And if I wanted to add a reason, then I could edit the list and add another reason there as well. And that's going to be what shows up in the Prisma chart, how many are selected for each reason. And again, you can mark it as duplicate, add a note, or for some reason, you could move it back to the screening. Doesn't come up much, but could choose to do that. And again, you can show the highlight or hide the highlights. When items have made it through the full text review to extraction, this is where your extraction template is going to come up. So once you have things that you can extract, going to see them here. I must admit, I have never used a quality assessment template, so I'm not going to speak to that. I have used the data extraction template before. So if we want to just look at what we have here. And here this is extraction template 2, so it's a customizable one. So here you can make changes on this side on the left, and they will show up on this preview on the right. So for example, if we click on something and we say like, oh, I want to add something, so I want to add like a single choice option, and just do a very generic. Just so that you can see what happens here. So any question or thing that you want to track of, you can add here and it will show up. But you can also then delete it if you want to. If we want to add a new item, it has all of these different options. So heading, subheading, text field. So if you just wanted to explain something about your field, you have a lot of options there. Okay. And then if you liked it, then you would go ahead and publish the form. So once you have it the way that you like it, or if you're just using that extraction 1 form, which you don't modify, then you can begin extraction, and it's going to show you the full text on the left-hand side of the page, slowly but surely, and then you're going to have your extraction form on the right side, and you would go ahead and you would grab all the information that you need from this article, and then go ahead and once you're finished, send for consensus, or you can do save if you're sort of working on it more slowly. And you would go through and do that for all of your articles. And then just the last thing that I wanted to point out from this page was this Prisma chart. So here, of course, we haven't gone through most of the records, so there's still most of the decisions to be made. But once you have gone through, it's going to be keeping track of all of this information. So it's going to say, this is how many you've imported, this is how many duplicates have been removed, this is what was screened, this is what was assessed for full text, this is what was ultimately included, this what is how many were excluded, and also the reasons why. So it really keeps track of you. Now, I had mentioned that there was an asterisk to the Prisma. And the main thing is if you do anything that impacts what is ingested into Covidence, then you need to be keeping track of that separately, because Covidence only knows about what exists here. So for example, if you're like, oh, I'm going to do some deduplication in EndNote first, and then only put those deduplicated records in Covidence, then this initial number is going to not reflect how many initial records you actually had. So just making sure that you are keeping track of that, or if there's anything that you add in through citation searching to your records, but it doesn't go through the same process because you find the full text and you are using it immediately. Just making sure you keep track of all of those different things. Because I've definitely encountered where people have done different things in slightly different places. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to go back to the slides. And some of these are just repetitions, but some of the caveats is, once you start reviewing records and making decisions, you cannot undo an import. So just make sure that I like to be very careful to make sure that the numbers of records that are in Covidence and are getting imported match how many articles I know were retrieved from that database. So your numbers should all match. So if you knew that you had a total of 1,000 records to begin with, there should be 1,000 in Covidence. It's easy sometimes for things to not realize that instead of selecting all records, you selected all the records on one page, and that something maybe has gone a little bit wrong. So just making sure, always making sure you have the number of records that you're expecting to in Covidence. The search capability is not historically great. So often I've had a little bit of a hard time when I'm like, oh, I want to just check on this particular record that I know it's in Covidence. And I sometimes found it surprisingly difficult difficult to find that particular record, even though it is actually in there. And again, the no automated finding of full text. Keep on hoping that this will change, but it hasn't quite yet anyway. I'd just like to mention, Bill might be curious if there's a mobile version. There's not a specific mobile app. However, there's a mobile optimized version for title and abstract screening. However, you can only pick yes or no. There is no maybe in this option. You do, though, have the option to skip. So if you wanted to do a maybe, you could just skip. You can also mark it as a duplicate and also show text highlights, but it also you can't see like your criteria and everything. It's because your screen space is very limited. But for title and abstract screening, there is this option that is available for mobile devices. So in terms of documentation available, we have a lot on our systematic review guide, and then also Covidence has a lot of content on their support page, and we're going to be putting those links into the chat. But I'll just take you on a quick show of what that looks like. So on our systematic review page, so systematic reviews for health sciences, we have a tab for Covidence. We go over lots of the basic information, give a lot of links, usually to Covidence, to things that we think might be particularly helpful. Covidence on their page has a very rich knowledge base. They also have some upcoming webinars, and they list those here. And they also have recordings of recent ones. So, you know, they have data extraction coming up, a 101. And then you can also, if there's something that you'd like to know more about, that they covered recently, they have recordings of those as well. And if, you know, you can also contact them directly if what you're particularly interested in isn't covered anywhere. And I've had good experiences so far with their responding to my questions. I'm a librarian, I tend to have a lot of questions. For setting up an account, you must use your UIC email address to sign up because it is specifically for UIC users. There is this sign up link. Tends to work pretty well, but if you do run into any problems, you can certainly let one of us know or reach out directly to Covidence. I think they've mostly resolved it now, but for a while we were sometimes getting people who just didn't get the email, or the link in the email didn't work. Okay, before we start going into any questions, just wanted to reiterate, I'm Amelia Brunskill. My email is abronx2@uic.edu. Emily's is emj11@uic.edu. A recording of this video will be sent out later this week. Next week's webinar is Deduplicating Your Records, a review of decisions, process, and tools. We have, I think, it's one of two webinars that we have left in our series. And there's full details on our main page for the systematic review workshops, which we're also going to be putting in the chat. But so we have deduplicating your records, and then our last one is on citation searching. We also have this evaluation link. We really appreciate any feedback that you're able to give on this or any of our webinars. Great. So I think at this point we can go ahead and stop the recording and take any questions.